Rink Wide Vancouver. Pre-game, post-game, every game presented by Bodog. From sports odds to free casino games, make a play at bodog.net. Wadden and JPat here with you with another edition of the pregame show as the Canucks head into Beantown to face off against the big bad Bruins.
Yeah, no, not a lot of time to feel sorry for themselves after the 3-2 loss in Toronto. Decent first period, but then the game got away from them. Bruce Boudreau lamenting after the fact, another lull, and we saw it in the first 10 minutes of the second period last night. That's when the Leafs did all of their scoring, and they rallied from that 2-0 deficit. Two words jump to mind as I think about this matchup tonight, and it's an early one, 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock for those of you that are looking for the Canucks and the Bruins on the West Coast. Compete and complete. And to Bruce's thoughts, the Canucks, they just don't play complete hockey other than the one game against the Pittsburgh Penguins when they were pretty good start to finish. And that seems like a lifetime ago. They've had these moments in every game where it feels like the game gets away from them. So they're going to have to play a complete game against the Boston Bruins. And to do that, they're going to have to compete with the Boston Bruins because there are no shortcuts. The Bruins are 13-2. They're the top team in the Eastern Conference. They are lights out good at home. In fact, they haven't lost at home yet. They're 8-0 on home ice this season. So that's what the Canucks are up against as they sort of limp into Boston, tails between their legs. Yeah, they got a win in Ottawa the other night to start the road trip, but a loss in Montreal followed up by another one in Toronto. And now, if they're going to salvage this road trip, they've got to find a way to get points out of Boston before they move on to wrap things up in Buffalo on Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, but the Boston Bruins are just the best team in the Eastern Conference, 9-1 in their last 10, and having that big comeback win over Buffalo last night.
Yeah, gave up a shorthanded goal early on, and after that, they rallied with 3 straight, 2 of them by Patrice Bergeron, who continues to get the job done. Seems like he's ageless and is ultimately one of the great leaders in the National Hockey League. But this team is so much more than just Patrice Bergeron. Obviously, he is the leader, and you've got Brad Marchand, who's back in the lineup and starting to perform the way that everybody knows that he can. But how about David Pastrnak? Pastrnak, outside of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, nobody has more points in the National Hockey League than David Pastrnak with 9 goals and 23 points. So if you put McDavid and Draisaitl aside, Pasternak's the most dangerous guy in the National Hockey League these days, and he'll be a handful for the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the Canucks, they've got some offensive weapons of their own, and we know that. And the power play clicked again in Toronto. JT Miller pulling the trigger with the man advantage. And of course, Bo Horvat feels like he scores every game. He opened the scoring against the Leafs, his 13th goal of the season. But a little concerned about Elias Pettersson, who celebrated his 24th birthday yesterday. Wasn't a whole lot to celebrate. Didn't figure in the scoring. The team didn't get the victory, obviously. Remember the 5-point night against Anaheim not that long ago? And we thought, look out, league, here comes EP40. Well, since then, just 1 goal in 4 games, and that was an empty netter to seal the deal in Ottawa at the start of the road trip. But beyond that, just 3 points in the last 4 games for Elias Pettersson, only 2 shots on goal in Toronto against the Leafs. So he's got to make a little more noise than that. You'd love to see him sort of elevate his game and lead this hockey club into a place like Boston, where the Bruins are the stingiest team in the National Hockey League. And for all the struggles the Canucks have had on the penalty kill this year, Canucks have given up 19 power play goals to opponents. The Bruins have surrendered just 3. They're killing penalties at 94.4% on the season. So if the Canucks want to see how penalty killing is done, they should take some notes as they look over the other side of the ice tonight against this Boston team that is putting on a clinic every time that they take penalties.
All right, that leads us to our question of the day. And of course, you talked about that depth, how stacked the Boston Bruins are. So we asked you can have one Boston Bruin player play on your team. Who would that player be, JPat?
Well, if the Vancouver podcast, I'm not sure that people want to hear Brad Marchand. So I'll put him aside, although you could make a convincing argument for Brad Marchand and, of course, Patrice Bergeron. But you know what? When you look at the weaknesses of the Vancouver Canucks, could you imagine Charlie McAvoy for the next decade patrolling the blue line for the Vancouver Canucks? So that's probably the guy that I would say right here, right now. Now, McAvoy has been out for most of the season, just came back, so probably isn't up to full speed just yet. But when he is, he's part of this group of dynamic young defensemen that are sort of taking the National Hockey League by storm. There are other options, though. You mentioned depth on this Boston team, and it goes beyond Pastrnak and Bergeron and Marchand. You've got Charlie Coyle, you've got Taylor Hall, you've got Jake DeBrusk, who at one point I thought wanted out of Boston, but now is pulling on the rope in the same direction. And all of these guys are filling the net right now. So it is going to be an absolute handful for the Vancouver Canucks. It's back-to-back for the Canucks. Of course, it is back-to-back for the Bruins as well. They were in Buffalo on Saturday night. So, we'll see if that's an issue. And of course, the Canucks saw Toronto after they had faced Pittsburgh the night before. So 2 opponents in a row playing back-to-back against the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks, though, we'll see what they can muster for the fourth game of this 5-game road trip. And as we said, if they're going to salvage the trip, they've got to find a way to get some points in a place where nobody is getting points so far this season.
Talking about filling the net, that leads me to my Bodog best bet, and I think the Bruins are going to fill the net here. I've got them on the puck line, minus a goal and a half at plus 110. I think the Bruins are going to win by 2 or more.
I think that's probably a safe bet and a good call. Now, upsets happen. That's what pro sports is all about. But when you just look at the records, 13-2 for Boston, 4 wins in 15 games for the Vancouver Canucks on paper, this one certainly seems like a mismatch. And as we said, the challenge gets that much steeper because the game's being played in Boston where the Bruins have been lights out good. So if the Canucks are going to somehow pull off this massive upset, they're going to need a handful of guys that are going to rise to the challenge. You could say they need a few guys to do something tonight.
All right, JPat. Well, perfect segue there. Who is going to do something for Vancouver?
Well, no morning skate because of the quick turnaround and the early start time. So we're still not sure about the goaltending, but let's hedge our bets that it's going to be Thatcher Demko, Boston College products, and strong ties to that area. We know his struggles, but wouldn't this be something if he could put all of that baggage behind him and look like Thatcher Demko of a year ago? So every time he gets the net, the Canucks need him to do something. 1 win in 10 starts on the season. Just an incredible statistic. So I don't think the team has lost faith in Thatcher Demko, but the performance of Spencer Martin, again, last night in Toronto, it gives the coaching staff something to think about. And Demko may be playing for the next start. It'll be interesting to see who gets the call in Buffalo, but we'll do a pregame show ahead of the Sabres game. This isn't about the Sabres or Buffalo. This is all about the Boston Bruins and who's going to step up to the challenge for the Vancouver Canucks. So let's put it at the feet of Thatcher Demko. He's certainly been capable of it in his time in the National Hockey League. And interesting to note that the Bruins rested their starter, Linus Ullmark, on Saturday in Buffalo. So their number 1 guy will be back between the pipes. He's 10-1 on the season with a 1.95 goals against average. Again, any way you come at this Boston team, the challenges are sizable. So I would think that if the Canucks somehow are going to pull off the monumental upset, they're going to need heroics from their goaltender. And if it is, in fact, Thatcher Demko, what a nice surprise that would be just based on his performance here in the first month of the season so far.
Well, we'll see if the Canucks can step up to the challenge against the Boston Bruins. The 2 more games to go on this road trip for Vancouver. They're going to have to get some points if they're going to want to come out on the positive side. We'll have the post-game show for you as quick as we can after the final horn. This has been another edition of the Rink-Wide Vancouver podcast presented by Bodog. For Jeff Patterson, I'm Andrew Wadden. Remember, Rink-Wide is the show that always scores.